Hey guys, welcome into another episode of From the Wing. I'm Christian Clark, the Pelicans beat writer for NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. The draft is over. The New Orleans Pelicans decided to stay at number 14. There was some interest in Scoot Henderson. They were not able to move up. Ended up taking Connecticut's Jordan Hawkins, a guy who can shoot the piss out of the ball. I always love the draft, man. It's just a really fun night seeing how the board falls. I think this was a pretty good draft. I think there's going to be a lot of just NBA contributors and a couple of different stars from this class. What did you make of the night?
Obviously, like the shocker of the day is Cam Whitmore. You're watching mock after mock after mock has him pretty like solidly in the top five. I was just listening to a podcast that said I think it's a P3 consulting that does the performance measurement database, and said he has the closest profile of anybody in the last few years to Anthony Edwards.
Oh,
And
fascinating.
yeah, he is the closest explosiveness. So to have that guy, like, there are real concerns. Like he doesn't pass the ball at like ever. So that is a concern. Like he is just a downhill big guy on the ball. But athletic profile is usually like the thing that dominates the day when it's like really, really high. Look to the Thompson twins. We have no idea if their stuff's going to translate, but they're freak athletes. So, we're gonna draft him super high. So he was the shocker. Sounded like he had bad interviews and a scary medical thing that, apparently multiple teams wouldn't have been affected should he have been available to them. And other teams were like, this is definitely going to affect his career. So he seemingly fell for like not shenanigans reasons, but real reasons.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Before we get into the Pelican stuff, just kind of my takes at the top of the board.
Yep.
I think it's going to be a mistake that Charlotte took Brandon Miller over Scoot Henderson. Mitch Kupchak addressed local media afterwards and basically gave a gobbledygook answer as to why they selected Brandon Miller over Scoot Henderson. I'm wondering who made that decision. The reporting around it basically was Michael Jordan is going to have the juice here. This is going to be his call, one of his last big calls before he's the majority owner right now and he becomes a minority owner. Woj had it right the whole way. They were going to take Brandon Miller. There's some Sham shenanigans where he said, oh, maybe it's going to be Scoot Henderson. And hey, maybe that was like to move the FanDuel line a little bit. Shams is a FanDuel employee.
It swung like 500 points in each direction inside of like 6 to 8 hours every time he tweeted something.
We're not going to do another media segment on this show, but it seems extremely problematic that FanDuel is employing a newsbreaker. I loved that Portland just stayed there and made the Scoot Henderson pick. I think they did the right thing for them, and their messaging afterwards was great of, we love Damian Lillard. We want him to retire here. We think we can make that work. We think Scoot Henderson is a transcendent talent. I love that they did it. I love how they handled it. And I like the Amen Thompson thing too for Houston. I mean, I think him and Jalen Green make a lot of sense together. I kind of like some of the pieces they have. Ime Udoka, I mean, guy is clearly a good coach. Like he's gonna help them like just become more serious. So I really liked what happened at 3 and 4.
I feel slightly differently. I agree with you completely on the Brandon Miller thing. We've talked about that a ton. A lot of people are tried to compare him to Paul George and say like he's the next Paul George. He is not nearly athletic enough to be Paul George. Your hope for him is that he turns out to maybe be Chris Middleton. Like that's more his ceiling than Paul George. It is not this two-way dynamo thing. So like he's still great and he's still probably the third best player in the draft, but Scoot just has more and could be the number one on a team. Like he has that possibility. And I just don't believe Miller has that. I feel a little differently about Portland. I don't disagree with this decision in a vacuum. When you have these constraints and you're looking at Scoot and the option is pick him or do something stupid and take like Amen Thompson at 3. I would have loved it if they did that because that could have gotten really fun for us maybe. But staying there and picking him is the right decision. The wrong decisions is all the ones that led to this place, where it seems like everything they're going to do is kick the can, kick the can, kick the can, kick the can, never make a true decision about what the hell they're going to do with their franchise. And now they're going to go try and peddle Simons to somebody to get an upgrade, because while I do believe that you can do something with Dame and Scoot, and like Scoot may very well play in Summer League and then play a little bit, and then him and Dame get along and everything's fine, you can't possibly deploy those two, give him the ball enough, and have Simons out there being worth his contract when they all do the same thing. They all need the same amount of the ball. So I would imagine Simons is headed somewhere, and that's fine. It just feels like now that's happening after the fact instead of proactively. And maybe it's because you don't want to give your hand away and whatnot. Maybe the market for him wasn't great initially. You're going to try and build it up and do something. I don't know. It just feels like everything with Portland is we'll just push it and push it and push it. We'll say we're going to do something. At the end of the day, placate Dame, sell the tickets. We don't really know what we are yet. And it's still kind of that.
It's time for Dame to ask out. It's just time. He's not going to look bad for it. I think that's been part of the reason he doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to take the PR hit. I mean, obviously, I think the main reason he's just very comfortable there, and that's awesome. But dude, just do it. It's time. No one cares. Like, we all respect you. I love you as a player. I love you as a person. Go to Miami. Like, I would love watching you with Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo. Do that.
That would be freak show stuff. And then on Amen Thompson, like maybe that's great for Houston. My thing with Houston now is like, please sign some adults. Just sign any adults, anyone you can find,
but not one with the big beard, right?
No,
yeah, not that adult.
Not the adult that's going to tell them the entertainment geography of the city. No, we need like veteran role players abound. Sent down to Houston. Otherwise, like, as promising as all those guys are, they're all messy and promising, and someone has to make the ships go, the trains move on time in their offense and in their defense. All of those dudes are projects. They all have potential, but like, who the hell's going to get it out of them? Ime Udoka's one thing. He's one guy. I don't know who's going to do that for him on the court. Like, we see that in our own team. You see Larry get played a ton. Why? Because he's moving guys around and telling them where to be on defense. Like, he is literally guiding them through the defense. So that's my concern there. Other than that, like, generally agree. Like, the way that it ends up playing out. I think the rest of it, the weird, like, Jarris Walker, Bilal Coulibaly flip. I just don't get why you did it. Not really sure why you did it. Like, you could have just probably stayed and y'all could have picked the same two guys. I can't even like imagine what the situation was. Thought Coulibaly went like a little earlier than anybody expected, but I get it. Like, swing on potential, swing on athleticism. You don't know what he is. Could be, super high upside. And then the Dick Meister, the Dick Hive, we
almost had it. It almost happened. He was the star. Sorry, Victor Wembanyama. Sorry, Victor. I know you want your breakfast tacos. Grady Dick was the star of draft night. He had the Dorothy red sequin fit. There were a compilation of his TikTok videos from Kansas coming out where he's dancing to weird electronic songs. Absolutely electric. I could not look away. I'm happy with the Jordan Hawkins selection. I'm pissed that we did not get the content gold mine that is Grady Dick in New Orleans.
Yeah, New Orleans got shafted, as we always do. And this is what happens to us. I mean, we were sitting there, we were looking at like a decent little pile of players. Like, I think you and I both like Kobe Buffkin a little bit too. And he was sitting there too. But like Grady being there was like, okay. Once he got to Toronto, I just kind of assumed he was going to be available to us because I'm looking at Toronto and what they need to do. And like, Masai's just going to keep doing this thing where he pretends Toronto is still competitive and he's not shopping everybody, but he's actually going to go shop everybody again. Like, what are we doing? What is Toronto doing? It's the run it back show. We called it on the pod last year that all the trade talk was going to end up being bunk and they were going to like end up trading for someone and compete. And they did. But now what? Like, and so they take Grady Dick, they take a guy that's like there to lift their floor. And instead of like a prospect, like a talent to develop, which just seemed like a weird move. And they robbed us, all the dick jokes. They all of them write themselves. And now we won't get to have near as much fun. I thought Dick would have fit well here. And it's really a struggle now.
Yeah, I mean, the Pelicans wanted Grady Dick. If he was there at 14, they would have taken him over Jordan Hawkins. I just think those are probably the best two shooting prospects in the draft. Grady just is a little bit bigger, 6'7". Hawkins is 6'4". I think he has more upside generally as an offensive player. I mean, Hawkins is, definitely got the edge as far as a movement shooter, and Hawkins is an electric freaking shooter. But I just think Grady, has got more upside in terms of, well, if they're going to close out, I can go off the dribble and hit this pull up or get all the way to the rim and things like that. I mean, he's also just, 19, whereas Hawkins is 21. He's just a younger prospect. But once Grady was off the board, they went Hawkins. I think they might have considered Lively if he was there. I think they liked Bilal Coulibaly. But it was, I think, as far as my understanding, the options were take Hawkins here or trade back. They went with Hawkins. I can understand why. We'll definitely talk about like the Hawkins fit, him as a player, but let's get into the Scoot Henderson stuff because there was so much smoke coming from this, and Shams Sharani only added to it when he tweeted the Pelicans and Scoot Henderson met recently before the draft. That was news to me. I'll be honest. I didn't know about that. But this was very, very real. Like the Pelicans' interest in Scoot was very real. Like I won't use some of the language that like the team decision makers used to express their admiration for Scoot as a prospect, but I'm just telling you, like they love this guy and are so high on his potential, as a player. But I'm telling you guys, the mentality, that's the difference between like, Scoot and the two guys who have been centerpieces here for the last 4 years. Like they were believers in just this guy is going to come in and try to kill people every day. And you're just like, you're just not going to have to worry as much about the BS, like he can be, a star who actually is someone who is leading you in terms of your culture too. It didn't happen. I was told that the Blazers were not interested in doing business with the Pelicans. Basically, like the Trailblazers, like, no, we've decided to make this pick. We're making this pick. There wasn't a whole lot of conversation with them in New Orleans. I'm not really sure about anything with Charlotte. But I have to admit, I was a little disappointed that this didn't get done because I had just hyped myself up so much. I was like, I kind of want to see Scoot here now.
Yeah, we talked about it for so long, like for the days leading up, because those initial reports got out that, of the heavy interest, that I think all of us were like sitting there waiting. I definitely had people texting me asking like, do you think we're going to do it? Or do you think it's going to be Zion? Do you think it's going to be Ingram? Like everybody had just kind of sat back waiting to see, will Scoot happen? Will it not? Yeah, I mean, his arms are cartoon character stuff. Like he's got a 6'9" wingspan and he's got striations that are the size of my calf muscle on his arms. He's kind of like, he's a freakish guy. And we're both obviously super excited about him. Like already believed in him a lot. And unfortunately, or fortunately, it's, we talked about what the possible outcomes of this were going to be. I believed going into this that the thing that makes the most sense, given where everything sits, is that the trade wasn't going to play out because I think it's hard to live by. I think it's a hard thing to bet given what's happened, given what your previous bets on these players have been, the message that it sends and everything. Like, I don't think you're wrong about the player, but also understand something about like how these conversations go. Now that it didn't happen, of course, like we're going to get a lot of positive propaganda that everything's fine. Everything's always been fine. We never had these conversations. We were never actually interested. We didn't talk. Guys, semantics. If there was quote unquote never an offer, sure, they may not have actually like given them an offer written on paper. They may not have written their names in an email. They clearly have conversations about hypothetically who would go for what. And the Zion stuff didn't come out like by mistake. There was just so much smoke here that like now it's like cleanup time. Now it's going to be it's the best offseason he's ever had. He's living in the gym. It's like
were you guys aware? Were you guys aware that we were in second place in the Western Conference when Zion got hurt? We were one game out of first place when he got hurt. Did you guys even watch last season? I bet I bet that's what the spin will be.
Yeah, and it's coming. And like, but that's what happens. Like Brandon and Zion, if their names come up in trade conversations, like they don't really have a right to be upset that conversations were had, because fundamentally you have not done enough here to take your name out of those conversations. They didn't offer you technically. So, now we'll do the spin and you do the spin, but like they both kind of owe the franchise at this point, given what past events have occurred. Like, I just kind of don't care. I don't need the spin, but it's coming.
Shamit Dua wrote a good post in his email newsletter, the cost of leadership and just all the different ways, the Pelicans have kind of overpaid for guys who aren't the main two guys to come in and like set the culture and be leaders. Like that is very heavily related to the Pelicans' interest in Scoot. I'll just tell you, like, I don't care how they spin it. Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram have not been leaders the past couple of years. Like if you're a leader and you have a toe bruise, you don't sit out 29 games. That's just what it is. And maybe it could change going forward. I think David Griffin has kind of sold Brandon Ingram as something he's not. I think Brandon Ingram is like very well liked generally by his teammates, but like I just don't think he's that guy, or he hasn't been to this point in his career. I think he's just a very good player who wants to just show up, do his job, and go home. But like he's not a culture setter. And Zion, I mean, Zion's just a kid. Like he's just not. He's trying to learn how to be an adult. So
yeah, let's just get him out on the floor before we start worrying about any leadership words. That stuff just needs to get put on the shelf for a couple of years, because right now we just need to see him with a basketball in his hands.
That's like Brandon's a grown man. Like that, Zion's trying to get there, I guess.
And Brandon's still very young, but Brandon's been in the league a long time, so like he has basketball years. Because I think Brandon's like 25.
Yeah, he's been in the league 7 years now.
Old. Yeah, but he's been here since he's 18, so like he kind of gets the deal now at this point. And he's in a steady place. But yeah, like I understand it, especially if you look like the people that were chosen to like potentially be leaders and culture setters. Like the first two that were brought in were kind of a nightmare. And then the Stan thing and like all these people, it's there's been some missteps. So, I don't think, for what it's worth, I don't think it would have been a misstep with Scoot at least, but I understand the interest. It is valid.
A couple of things I heard was Zion just did not have as much value as the Pelicans thought he should have, and that just makes sense given recent happenings, and we'll just leave it at recent happenings. And the other thing too is like maybe there was a little bit of noise about, oh, Charlotte could want Brandon Ingram, but I never really got any indication that the Pelicans in the past few days, like the more people I talked to, and maybe I didn't have a clear picture of this early on, but the more people I talked to in the past couple of days, it just didn't seem like Ingram was on the table. And like a lot of people I talked to were basically like, Griff will just never trade Brandon Ingram. Like that's his guy, for better or for worse. My personal opinion is, maybe this will get tomatoes thrown at me, I would have offered Ingram for like number 2 and Hayward to Charlotte. I would have seen if they would have done that. I'm not really sure what offers were made and what were not. I don't think the Pelicans are in a terrible place either. If these guys just play basketball, they'll be fine. Like they got a ton of talent. They can be a very good team. Like if this breaks right, they could very well be in the Western Conference Finals next season. I probably wouldn't bet on it. So I'm not disappointed that I guess they are going to kind of continue with the status quo, probably a different center in there. But if it was up to me, I probably would have like tried to swap out Ingram for Scoot and, just gone with, I got Zion for 5 years. I got Scoot under team control for 7 years. And these are 2 guys.
It's a shame that, big media is such a Brandon Ingram hater. And rest in peace to your Menchies when this drops, because the stands are a-coming. Look, every conversation around this team that you want to have, positive and negative, they're all valid. Every conversation anybody wants to have about the stars, about the team building, about the process, like pretty much every conversation is valid because all of this stuff has happened. Everyone deserves criticism, but there's also potential here still, and there's still the ability to erase a lot of the chaos that's ensued. This is how I thought the market would play out. There is no reason that anyone should have their requisite value except for Brandon. He's the only one that's played enough and achieved consistently enough for you to believe that there is more on the table for him and that he like truly is something. There is a certain amount about Brandon that we know he is as a basketball player that you can bank on. His stats are his stats. They're coming. And his assist ability is probably higher than you thought it was 2 years ago. I expected his market to be the one that made sense. In no world should anybody pay top dollar for Zion right now. Why would you? So the idea that you're going to send Zion out and get Scoot and stuff, that's probably what they wanted to happen. Realistically, you were going to get Scoot and salary match, maybe. And you might even have to throw something in yourself because they're taking as much of a mystery box as you're getting rid of. You know,
Yep.
we understand that the production when he's out there is like, it projects like a Hall of Famer, like it does, but he doesn't play and he misses and he gets in messes all the time. So like, you know, this is exactly why I thought it wouldn't happen, like away from the rumors and away from everything. Like if you just look at the assets, look at the market, look at what they've done, it's hard to believe that anybody has value other than Brandon. And if they don't offer Brandon, how are you going to get anything done? So I think I'm still in the camp like I was before. I still think I'm, you know, your best bet as a manager leader in that front office is to get them out there by any means necessary. And we're like a year early on giving up. If something happens this year, it's nuclear holocaust is coming for the Pelicans and it's starting over. It's a wrap. But you got to give it one more try because you just haven't seen it.
The last thing I'll say is there was kind of an argument going around of like, well, if you trade Brandon, you'll lose the locker room. And I guess my counterpoint to that is, did you watch the Pelicans in the month of December? Because Brandon wasn't playing and they're all having more fun than they've ever had in their basketball lives. So it doesn't matter unless if you're winning. It just doesn't matter if you're winning. So I think people get over it. They understand it's a business. But look, the Pelicans are still in a really good spot. They could be a very good team next year. We talked about what might have been. Let's talk about what is. I asked Trajan Langdon after the draft, this roster, the way it looks now, how different will it look when you guys show up to training camp in September? He basically said, I don't foresee it looking much different. Griff said, we wanted to add two things this offseason. We wanted to add outside shooting and wanted to add rim protection. We at least worked on the outside shooting component of this in the draft with the selection of Jordan Hawkins. I imagine we will continue to look at the rim protection element of that. I would read that as we're going to continue looking at some options at center. And, it's very possible that Jonas Valanciunas, who's one of my favorite Pelicans I've covered in the past 4 years, big science, a man who got a degree this summer, I believe. Mm-hmm. Maybe not on the Pelicans next year. But yeah, I think it's just safe to assume at this point, B.I., Zion, CJ, they're back. Trey Murphy, Herb Jones back. Maybe there's a different starting center in here. And that's your team for next season.
I mean, start getting hyped for Carlo Matkovic and Liam Robbins, the future front court of the New Orleans Pelicans. Yeah. So that, the other fun name that you shouldn't really care about, but like, hey, it's a shooter. Landers Nolly is another guy that got added to the Pelicans on a contract after the draft. So like they did the same thing, like another wing shooter. And then they did sign a center after the draft, which for what it's worth, the Pelicans are really good at finding dudes that are substantive in the late hours of the draft and via undrafted stuff. And Liam Robbins is, shocker, a defensive player of the year. So interesting little tidbits. But Jordan Hawkins, crazy movement shooter. At the 14th pick, like we're gonna say some things that are going to be positive. We're going to talk about what he's good at, what he's bad at. Generally speaking, like what you tend to get out of the 14th pick is Denzel Valentine, who's not a good basketball player.
way
Like,
better outcome than Denzel Valentine.
yeah. So I feel good about him relative to what the 14th pick usually is. There is a clear elite skill in this kid. He is a wild movement shooter. His release, his rise, his prep, his release is so quick. It is up there with all of the top guys in the NBA in terms of how compact his motion is, how square he gets, how fast. Like, it is very, very Klay Thompson reminiscent. His defense is not, his size is not. I'm not calling him Klay Thompson, but what he does at the top of his body to get a shot off, it's just like those guys. So you cannot be mad at taking that at 14. People call him small. He's not small. He is slight. He does not weigh a whole lot. He is also not a terrible defender. He has two big problems, and they relate to his size. He competes like hell. He's actually a good off-ball defender. He has really active hands and competes really well as an ISO on-ball guy. His problem is when he's matched up on a guy that's bigger than him, or when he gets pick and rolled or screened to death, like, he can just get eaten alive by that stuff because he weighs like $180, you know? So that's like the real criticism. And again, this is the 14th pick. It's the 14th pick. Historically, this pick is a terrible outcome. It's a guy who's not on your team in 3 years. And this kid looks like he could stick around because at the very least, he's got a wild ability to shoot the leather off the ball.
Yeah, and I just think, look, if you got a team with Zion Williamson and you're building around him, put some shooting around him. It's really not that complicated. Like, do you want a pathway towards being a very good offense, at least in the regular season? And, you know, you could talk about playoffs and stuff you need to have then, but like, Zion plus shooting equals a lot of points. It's really not that hard. They had Trey Murphy, thrived off of playing Zion last year. They got CJ. Like, those two guys basically combined to hit half of the 3-point shots last year. Jose Alvarado, pipsqueak, same height as me, backup point guard, was third on the team in 3-point makes. They needed more shooters. Like, they just needed more shooting outside of CJ and Trey Murphy, and hopefully Brandon Ingram can start taking some threes again. That's been an ongoing 2-year thing where they've tried to get him to take more and he just won't. But yeah, man, I mean, I didn't dislike the pick. That's for sure. I think it's fine. I think like he can contribute, like as soon as his rookie season. I think like Willie, I just don't understand the criticism of like Willie won't play young players. Did you guys watch Willie Green's first year as coach when they made the playoffs and 3 of the 9 players in the rotation were rookies? So I don't get that one as much.
I don't get the Trey underutilized, not going to mismanage him conversation either, because I think that one is intellectually dishonest.
Yeah, he's about to get $120 million bag probably. So yeah, it seems like it's kind of working out okay.
Well, my struggle, like, people just try to compartmentalize these players in really like lazy ways. Jordan Hawkins and Trey Murphy have nothing in common except for the fact that they shoot a high percentage on 3-pointers. Otherwise, their athletic profile and what they did well coming out of college is like not the same at all. And like Jordan Hawkins, it is not hard to find a way to get him out on the court because he gets himself open. Trey Murphy is just learning how to take advantage of overplayed defense. He is just getting to the point where he is aggressive on closeouts. Like, if a guy's hand is coming up at his face, he takes the shot anyway and buries it. We just got there at the end of last season. Jordan Hawkins walks into the NBA doing those things well already. That is the type of guy he is. He is the lightning release, I'm going to bury you murder shooter. You don't have to scheme him open. He's going to run around like Rip Hamilton, and he will find a spot.
I think like Jordan and I agree that Jordan and Trey are just very different players. I mean, Jordan, I think, has showed more willingness to pop contested threes, at least in college. He's just more comfortable taking them with guys right in his grill. Trey Murphy will fill to space, and I think he can be a fine cutter, but he was just not a guy constantly running around screens in college. Like, I think the movement that Jordan Hawkins is, that consistently plays with is a new element to the Pelicans offense. I agree with Trajan Langdon's assertion that like we are adding a new component to our offense with Jordan Hawkins that we didn't have previously. So they are, both very talented shooters And Jordan Hawkins is definitely not the athlete, doesn't have the size Trey Murphy has.
Right.
But I mean, just coming out of college, like a better strictly shooting prospect than Trey. I'm not saying like he's going to be a better player or anything like that.
Right. Exactly. That's all we're saying is that the two loudest criticisms appear to be the laziest. That's all I'm saying about that pick. It's very weird, the rookie thing, and that he's gonna, like, even KOC came out and was like, oh, they're gonna mismanage this guy. This is where, like, I've just spent a few years working in analytics. I'm very likely going to continue working in analytics. There's something that tends to fall out of analytics sometimes that you have to, like, purposefully keep in it. And it's humanity. If you remove it and you just look at numbers on a sheet, you can convince yourself of pretty much anything if there's data to back it up. But the data has to be purposeful. And so my struggle is, there's a story of Trey on paper. There's the story of how he played throughout the season. He was handled well last year, and he started to pop because of decisions that were made. It's not like this giant thing where, like, the team was against him and held him back, and they're going to do the same thing to Jordan Hawkins. They're different guys. Jordan does not need people to open him up. He can get himself open. The concern with him is, like, there are real ones. His handle is a little suspect. If he has to break a guy down, if he has to get past the guy and the defense isn't tilted, he's going to struggle to do that. He is going to be better off if Jose's really healthy and he can play a little bit with him, or if he can play next to CJ a little bit, like, he will be fine. He's not Devontae Graham. He doesn't act like Devontae Graham. He's not that small. Like, just so many weird stories because people, I think, are like, it's not a sexy pick to people because he's skinny. Anyway, that's my spiel. I can cut myself off now.
Yeah, no, I didn't dislike the pick. I mean, I had a scout from another team. I was like, I just texted him. I was like, what'd you think? And he's like, yeah, I thought it was fine. Like, he was, in the 10 years this guy's been doing it, he's like, this guy's one of the best shooting strokes I've ever seen. And I don't think that's a bad outcome when your best offensive player is Zion Williamson, maybe the best, like, drive and kick guy when he's right in the NBA, and, like, up there at least with, like, LeBron and Giannis, with just the sheer amount of attention he draws when he drives the basketball.
And what the hell happens? What happens if we look back in 2 years and Jordan Hawkins is maintaining 20 more pounds on his body? Like, he's a completely different player if that happens. So if that's, like, if of all the challenges you take on picking at 10 and later, betting on the guy who's an elite, like a prototypical technical shooter that, like, needs to put on some mass and strength, that just feels like a better bet than, like, Kobe Buffkin. The reason I liked him so much is he's just a really well-rounded basketball player. He's just kind of good at everything. There's nothing about him that's, like, elite, but he doesn't really have a hole in his game. So he's going to be good for whoever he plays for. I believe that. We could have taken him, whatever. It probably would have been harder to get him on the court and find a place for him in this team than it would be for Jordan Hawkins. And Jordan Hawkins does bring you something you don't have, like we said.
Yeah, Buffkin was the one guy, like, when the Pelicans were on the clock at 14, I was like, Hawkins or Buffkin. I mean, I think Buffkin's nice. I mean, lefty, really good finisher at the rim. He's not exactly a point guard, but he does have really intriguing playmaking, like, flashes. I think the shot looks pretty good. And just his, like, the skill for me, the crucial skill is, like, this guy has a lot of craft and skill as a finisher at the rim, and it seems like he's going to be able to get there consistently. So, like, Buffkin would have been the other guy. It's like, all right, I would have thought long and hard about him. I think he's talented and got a chance to make it at the NBA level.
Yeah, and after that, like, I'm sure there are a bunch of people that, like, whenever a guy starts to fall, I'm sure everybody's like, oh, Cam Whitmore. Look, we may never hear the exact medical stuff on Whitmore, but, like, at this very moment, I made this joke last podcast. I'll make it again. At this very moment, I don't believe Cam Whitmore has passed the ball. So I don't know how he'd do here. I get, like, wanting to do upside plays. Like, Leonard Miller was a guy we thought would go around here. He ends up going in the second round. Like, he falls out. City Sissoko falls into the second round. Like, there were not a lot of teams swinging on, like, just potential. Like, once we got after 10, it was odd. It was actually like, have they proven they can do something on the floor? Okay, I value that more than just athletic profile.
It was a great day for the French, by the way. Great day
great
for
day.
the French. Yeah. The takeover. What
Yeah.
Wemby? I need his review of the breakfast tacos. I love how much he's embracing this. I was laughing too that they had what's the guy's name? Marty Smith, ESPN
Yeah.
guy.
Oh, in the Spurs jersey.
Yeah,
with
they
his
had
arms
Marty
out?
Smith in the Spurs jersey and jorts and cowboy boots, the cowboy hat, just hyping up the crowd with the crackhead coyote next to him.
Yep. It's
You
good
know,
stuff.
ESPN, if you're listening, you should have had Andrew Lopez in that role. My guy, Andrew Lopez, in the jorts and the cowboy boots, hyping up the crowd. All right.
Marty's the hype man. He did it for Zion too. Marty is the go-to ESPN hype man. He can get excited about literally anything. They could put him in front of drying paint and we would be like, yes, yes.
Oh,
Marty's
man.
great, man. I love that guy. He's a cartoon character. He's like a very, very polite, well-coiffed version of the crackhead coyote. Like, you know, he's just a more mild-mannered version. They may as well be brothers.
Yeah. Wemby, fatten yourself up with some breakfast tacos, brother. Adam, thank you for hopping on this Friday afternoon. Appreciate you guys for listening, and we'll talk to you again soon.